that show open. I'm so excited. Welcome, everybody. I am Vera Jones, and you are watching another episode of Perseverance Live. Again, I'm your host, Vera Jones, and thank you for joining the show. So if you are joining us from Facebook or YouTube Live or wherever else your viewership or our viewership has extended, we are always pleased that you come on in. This is a space and place that I hope that you're going to come to trust, that you can always be inspired, you can be educated, and you'll be motivated to live a life of significance and purpose as we interview people who are doing just that. Perseverance speakers come through the Perseverance Speakers Academy. I get to coach them, imagine my excitement, and they leave hopefully much stronger people, influencers in the world. And so I always look forward to doing my part to doing that, helping people do that. They're ordinary people with extraordinary stories. And learning to tell those stories is one of the things that I enjoy most. Today, one of the best stories I've ever heard, actually. I am smiling from ear to ear because this young lady, Emily Zimmermann, makes me do that. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be a part.
Yep. And tell me, what part of Colorado? Where are you coming from?
Right in Denver.
Denver. All right. Denver, Colorado, way out there. Well, thank you for joining us. And so one of the things that we talk about on the show, so each speaker that appears has to go through a graduation process. And in that graduation process, they have to present in front of a panel or a forum of people who give them feedback. And so my favorite part of this, well, they're all my favorite parts, but one of them is the setup. And so we work a lot on developing the setup as speakers, just really letting folks know exactly what you do, what you talk about. And Emily, you did that. And I want to play a little clip from your graduation that I stole, if you will. So here's the setup. I loved it, by the way.
After losing my vision, many no longer knew me as Emily or Emily Zimmermann, but rather the blind girl. I want to do a short demonstration right at the start to help illustrate how labels can be so deceiving and hurtful in the end to both the person giving the label as well as the person the label is given to. So, for example, I have this can here. It, of course, has a label on it, right? Well, as we'll talk about a little later, I'm not a vegetable fan per se. So this label of peas or beans or whatever, not a fan of. So we just talked about getting rid of the labels we're given. So we're just gonna rip this label off because we don't want it. So now it's just a can. We have no preconceived ideas or thoughts of what it is. So because we don't have any preconceived ideas, let's just pop it open and dump it out. So that can didn't have peas or beans or vegetables, but rather chocolates, illustrating how deceiving labels can be.
What a great setup. One of the best setups that I've seen so far. It was creative. I like the fact that even though you are blind, you chose a visual medium, a very, very visual medium to help pull your audience in. And you talked about labels. So it's one of those things that just always stuck in my mind, because we all know that young children in particular struggle with labels and trying to find their place in the world. Absolutely. What were some of the obstacles of you and overcoming labels, Emily? How did it all begin for you?
Labels was a huge thing I had to face and attempt to overcome. I grew up very normal childhood, and I know, gave labels myself. But then having the whole role reversal and being the one who was labeled was very challenging. And I just strive for people to see me for me rather than me, the blind girl, and holding a cane and braille and all those things, because there's so much more beneath the surface. But it's a huge struggle for so many.
Yeah, one of the things too is, when you first came to me, I'll never forget the day that I got your call, and I was really just getting started with the Perseverance Speakers Academy. And you shared with me that you had a craniopharyngioma. And immediately it felt like divine intervention, like we were supposed to be united. I felt cherubs and violins playing, I just was like, oh, this is awesome. Because obviously I had a super, super sensitive heart to that, because my son at the age of 12 experienced a craniopharyngioma that left him legally blind. So I understood a lot of your challenges, though I'll never claim that I fully understand. But I certainly, as a parent and a caretaker, had tremendous empathy for what you had to go through as a young child in dealing with not just the blindness, but a lot of physical things that dealt with it. How did your story begin? What happened when you lost your sight?
So I did live a very normal childhood. From birth to 15, I didn't have any vision problems or really health problems at all, for that matter. And I did all the normal things, biking, swimming, and loved it. And childhood was great. Then as a freshman in high school, I started to have trouble seeing the board in my classes. Well, of course, thought I just needed glasses. So many tests with the eye doctor. And the one thing I do distinctly remember is the eye chart and moving up a line, finally getting to the big E and not being able to see it in one of my eyes. But at the end of that appointment, he told us that there was nothing he could do to fix my vision. So several appointments with an eye specialist, and finally he suggested an MRI. That MRI is what changed my life forever. It wasn't glasses that would fix my vision. It wasn't even something simple. But that's when I was diagnosed with a craniopharyngioma that was pushing on my optic nerve, causing the vision problems.
Wow. And then again, so young, here you are just going into your freshman year. All of the excitement and yet all of the nervousness and anxiety. And then to have this happen. This whole perseverance, right? The persistence through difficult challenges and overcoming obstacles. I know that you had many. When you look back, what would you say were one or two of the most challenging things that you had to overcome?
Oh, just one or two. Perseverance, you just said, is huge, and I totally agree. And I mean, perseverance to just keep going. And that sounds so broad and huge, but it's just the truth. Because when everything around you is falling apart, everything around you is changing, and just that ability to get up out of bed and go do something again that is way different is very difficult. And that is a huge thing that I had to push through. And then I would say the other way perseverance has played a big role is just learning all the skills after high school, coming out to Colorado and learning Braille and all those different things that, again, incredibly challenging and difficult. But I knew if I wanted to be successful, I would need to know those skills. So perseverance absolutely paid off in those situations.
One of the things that struck me, brought me to tears, actually every time that I work with you and I thought about it, as a mom, I remember my son one day just being, quote unquote, a normal kid, right? And going to school and having friends and playing and running and doing sports and it ain't riding his bike, those things that you talk about, anything that he wanted to do. And he was fine. And then the next day, whenever after he went through the surgeries and the hospitalization and everything else. And like you said, he arrives at school and now he's the kid who's blind. And my son also was hearing impaired. So he had he had hearing aids and a cane. And so now suddenly he was this different person.
Mm-hmm.
And as a mom, even though the blindness, even though the illness, what upset me so much is that kids were so brutally mean. He got bullied and he got
Mm-hmm.
picked on because he was different. You shared that experience in the open that we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
that you stopped being Emily and suddenly became the blind girl. Talk about that experience a little bit.
Oh, very, very much so. The labels I received was outrageous. And by the people I received them from, even more shocking. All of the friends I had, everyone left when I lost my vision. I would, hear them over talking because, we lived close to each other because we did everything together. And I would hear them talking in the halls or whatever. I would go to lunch or to the mall and me not being invited. And it was all because of those labels they placed. And it was incredibly, incredibly challenging. And for a long time, I had a very hard time with it. But now I just say, they're lost.
It's funny. My son learned to say that too. It's like, I used to tell him, I was like, you're an incredible dude. It's their loss, right?
That's right.
So, but that's a common.
But it's hard.
Yeah. And people shun and fear what they don't know and what they don't understand. So how important is advocacy? How important is it to get education and awareness out? You chose to be a motivational speaker in part, I would think, to help advocate for persons with disabilities.
Absolutely. And it's huge. And I think, like you just said, there's so much fear involved. And your son, as well as myself, we very much get it because we've been on both sides. We know the hesitation in asking questions. We know, do you say something? Do you offer help? Do you not? But now that I'm on the other side, it's so important. And like you said at the start, a huge part of my desire to do this is just to increase that awareness. And I love speaking to high schools, talking about labels and seeing people for who they are and those different things, just because advocating is so huge.
When we get back on the flip side, I want to take a little, we gotta let the sponsor get a little love. But when we get back on the flip side, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how you're now using your voice and using your experience, particularly with youth, to reach out and go to schools and help them understand how that they can make a difference, be more empathic, be more aware, and be advocates themselves. So we'll talk about that a little more on the flip side. And I also want to know a little more about your brothers, what life was like growing up with them. We'll be right back.
In today's busy, fast-paced world, you need hydration that can go the distance with you. Face it, most sports drinks are more like soda. Many contain tons of sugar, artificial flavoring, artificial colors, and artificial ingredients, sometimes leaving you feeling sluggish, nauseous, and bloated. Well, there's a new sports drink in town, and she's got game. Introducing Electra, supernatural hydration for everyday doers, hustlers, and athletes.
Reasons that we're here. Hey, it's Coach Vera Jones with the top 10 ways to know you should become a professional speaker. Number 1, you see or hear professional speakers and you say, I could do that. Number 2, you see or hear professional speakers and you say, I want to do that. Number 3, other people tell you you need to do that. Number 4, you already speak often in your workplace or your community. Number 5, you love telling stories and genuinely enjoy people. Number 6, you have a passion or calling for inspiring, uplifting, or educating others. Number 7, you know a lot about a thing or two. Number 8, you know a thing or two about a lot. Number 9, you're naturally charismatic or just have an influential presence in front of people. And number 10, you watch this video long enough to hear all 10 reasons of what you probably already know. It's time. Visit me, psvera.com. If you're serious and don't need any more reasons, let's talk about getting you started as a paid professional speaker. So we're talking to a professional speaker, Emily Zimmermann. For those of you that are joining us, again, please feel free to drop us a line in the chat. If you're joining on Facebook Live or YouTube Live, we'd love to hear from you. Afterwards, Emily is going to stick around and answer some of your questions. But we've been talking about blindness, labels, but also about hope. So I want to hear about, you shared with us that first time that you went to speak and how you learned a very valuable lesson of hope. And that really was the real premise of your story. It was just a great story. Share a little bit about that experience going to your high school to speak for the first time.
Absolutely. So when I was going to be going back to school, visually impaired, as a sophomore in high school, there was a lot of fear involved. And I would be the only blind student in the entire school. It was a small school, but still. So it was proposed to share my story at the Christmas assembly to help, increase awareness and let people know and that kind of thing before I'd go back in January. So my mom and I, we went up and we shared. And afterwards, going off to the side, several people came up and, oh, that was so good. Oh, I can't believe it. But there was this one girl who was off to the side and she was crying. And so I kind of stepped off to the side in a way to invite her to come forth. And after the gymnasium had settled down and a lot of people left, she did. And through sobbing tears, she shared with me how what I had said, the hope I seemed to have with everything I had been through, gave her reason to continue on. She had thought of committing suicide and was very seriously contemplating next steps and what to do. But to think that I could use everything I had been through, all the challenges and struggles and hurt and difficulties, and use it to share and save a life was huge. And that was what gave me the passion and desire to share to other people.
Man, and that's it. That's really, as motivational speakers, inspirational speakers, as speakers, just as people, the human experience, that connection, I think gives us power, it gives us purpose, and it does really, really fuel our passion to want to do this thing that we do. And you do it so well, and especially with young people. If there was something in particular you wanted to share with young people, I guess I have a couple of questions. Number one, just in general, if you wanted to educate people about persons with blindness and the labels and the limitations that people place on your life, what would you want them to know? What would you want them to think about and to change?
I would say as challenging, as difficult, and as hard as it might be, attempt, especially when you first meet someone, to put them on the same scale you put anybody else. Whether they're in a wheelchair, whether they have a cane, whether they have, hearing aids, doesn't matter. At the start, in my opinion, it's so important to put them on the same playing field. And from there, adjust it as needed, sure. But just don't have those initial thoughts and impressions and biases going into it. I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
I definitely think that happens. I think we naturally just go into our blind spots of what we don't know, and we make assumptions about what people can do. I know that can be extremely limiting and extremely painful.
And that's honestly one thing I've learned to love about my blindness. The fact that I can't judge someone by the way they look. I can't judge someone if they have some kind of assistive aid or technology. I can't judge someone if they're covered in tattoos or piercings or whatever we judge people by. I can't judge based off those physical features or appearances. And that's one thing I've learned to love about my situation.
I love it too, because when you see me, you see absolutely gorgeous. I know you do. I know you do.
Absolutely. I mean, what else is there to see? Vera Jones, baby.
Right. Yeah. Doesn't matter. So I love that. I love that about you. No matter what, on my worst hair days, I'm fabulous to you. So that's why we're good friends. That's exactly why. And then my other question to you was really going to be about for youth, for kids, because the ones, I mean, yeah, you get it from adults, but kids can be brutal and cruel. So when you're going into the schools and you're talking to these young kids, what are some of the things that you want to share with them or that you usually share with them?
I'd say one of the huge things is just having a positive self-image of yourself. Because it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to hear those things. You're going to be told those things. And unfortunately, because of the way our society is, it's unavoidable. And so I feel the strongest, biggest thing you can do for yourself is have that positive image. I just had a flashback to this. I think it was a YouTube video of this little girl. And she was in front of like a mirror. And she was, oh, I'm gorgeous. I'm beautiful. I'm just pretty. And all those different things. But I think we can learn a lot from that just in seeing ourselves for who we are and embracing that. And just that positive self-talk can be huge, huge.
Yeah. You know why I think that you resonate with so many people, Emily, is because you're just so, first of all, you have this little girl's voice. When you were telling me that you were 15, you know, that you lost your blindness at 15, I was like, oh my God, that was last year. Was that last year? Like how that, this was just, you know, and you have this young appearance and this young voice. Go ahead and give them the spoiler. How old are you?
I just recently turned 28.
Woo! Happy birthday.
But I keep telling myself, because what you said is so true, but like 20 years from now, it'll be great.
Yeah, exactly. And 20 years from now, you will have touched so many lives through your motivational speaking experience. So I'm really, really excited about that. Now, one last thing that you did that I really enjoyed is because I had an older brother, and you talked a lot about your brothers, and even though you clown around about your brothers and everything, how important was your family support, and is your family support?
Priceless. Absolutely priceless. I mean, they've been there with me through it all, and that has been huge. I mean, despite the countless stories of hanging baby dolls by the foot through doors or cutting off my Barbie's hair. I mean, even my brothers have just been amazing, and all of my family, I don't think there's no way I would be where I am today without the support and love I know I have from all of them. And that's priceless. So priceless.
And in a lot of ways, it takes a village. So, you know, how can we all, particularly when encountering persons with disabilities, specifically persons with blindness, how can we all be more like family? How can we show you greater support?
I mean, I think one way is the obvious way of just offering assistance. Is there anything I can do to help? But then another thing is just being there. If it's someone you see often, not just once, just talking as you walk by them. Hey, this is whoever you are. This is Emily. How are you doing today? You know, is there, you know, what do you have going on later today? Small talk, but that can be huge. Just those basic things that are so often overlooked can be instrumental in anyone with a disability, their life.
One of the other things that I was thinking about in this world right now, we struggle. I mean, diversity, equity, and inclusion is such a huge topic on so many levels. I think back, the first thing that comes to mind always is what happened, because we just 1 year of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and just a lot of different events that have taken place. And when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I can jump all the way over to the Middle East and what's going on with Gaza. So there's so many different things about all of these conflicting relationships because of people who do not value the other side, so to speak, or do not open their hearts and their minds to being accepting. And so we hear about, LGBTQ, we hear about racism, we hear about sexism. But one thing that sometimes gets overlooked is persons with disabilities.
Absolutely.
Any thoughts on that, on advocating for more awareness there?
I 100% agree. I mean, I think what you just said is all right on, that's a huge thing being pushed seemingly across every other board or spectrum, but a lot of times the disability or disabled category is overlooked. And part of me thinks that's because many people with disabilities don't stand up for their rights or what they believe in. And they just, all right, well, that's the way it is. And so I feel very determined to attempt to break that mold and break the shadow that we seem to be hiding behind or stuck behind, and bring as much exposure and awareness as possible during these times, especially since equity and inclusion and those topics are being pushed. Absolutely, they should be pushed concerning people with disabilities as well.
Well, I remember I did an event a few years back for the National Federation for the Blind, one of their, I think it was the Blind Merchants Division. And I remember they were talking about, in one of the forums, they were talking about only 50% or a number, my numbers may be off now, but it was a pretty startling number, graduate of persons who are blind or visually impaired, graduate high school, and only 30% are actually gainfully employed out in the world right now. And when you hear that, you really, really do embrace just how much that advocacy and that awareness is important. So I look forward to hearing your voice and making a difference in the world so that we can have greater equity and inclusion and sensitivity and accessibility for persons with disabilities. And I really, really appreciate you being on the show as well. Any final thoughts for the wonderful folks out there?
Just reiterating what I stated earlier about being yourself, losing your own labels you have of yourself, and losing the labels you have of other people. But thank you so much for having me today, Vera. It's been such an honor to be a part of the show today.
All right. Well, I'm not going to let you go because there are people on Facebook as well as YouTube that have some questions they're going to want to stick around and ask you. All right. So I appreciate you sticking around. But for us, that wraps up another episode of Perseverance Live. If you have an interest in becoming a member of the Perseverance Speakers Academy, I certainly hope that you will reach out to me. You can learn to share your story, much like Emily Zimmermann does right now, reaching out to people all over the globe. It's a beautiful thing to be able to educate and inspire others. You can find that consultation, an absolutely free consultation with me at psvera.com. Remember, in the middle of overcoming adversity or perseverance is Vera, all right, which means faith. So never doubt what God will do with yours to overcome perseverance and help others do the same. Thank you very much for joining us. Again, Emily Zimmermann, I'm Vera Jones. You be blessed. Emily, thank you again for sticking around. I'm going to go ahead and check in with our comments.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people on here. Alicia Coyle says, you're amazing. Willie Brown says, these people are so inspiring. Great job. Alicia wants to know, will the video stay up on YouTube? Yes, actually, it will render once I finally hit stop. It will render and it will always be there. Hi, Janet. You're amazing as well. Yes. All right. And she's thankful for the divine support point Emily had with you. That's awesome. So if you have any questions for Emily, or you want to know anything about blindness or advocacy, or how fabulous I look in her eyes, right? Whatever it is, feel free to throw it in to the chat. All right. I'm not seeing anything come up. And, yeah. Anything you want to say, Emily?
No, I don't think so. Just that it's been so good to be a part of this. And I just have such a strong desire in my heart and spirit to continue to speak and share and help people who need the hope, who need purpose, who just need that inspiration. It's just my desire so much. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we're going to make it happen because people need to hear your story. They need to hear your voice. They need to open that can of peas and get the chocolate. I need those chocolates right now. I've been on a diet. I'm having fits. So
diet.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're going to tune out now. And yes, you will be able to continue to check this out on both Facebook as well as YouTube at the existing links that you found us here. So we're going to sign off for the evening. Stay blessed and unstressed. Emily, stay on. I'll talk to you after the broadcast.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Good night.